The water turned black around 2,000 feet down, and I stopped checking my depth gauge after that. There wasn't any point. When you're plunging into something that feels like outer space, numbers don't matter. My helmet lights barely carved out a 20-foot halo in the darkness, just enough to see Nash floating beside me. His red jumpsuit looked like a bloody smear in the void. Isabella's voice crackled through the comms, letting us know the descent rate looked good. She was monitoring from slightly above, tablet strapped to her arm, green eyes probably locked on data only she could interpret. 2 minutes to bottom. Mickey's breathing came through the radio too fast. The kid was trying to act calm, but 3 miles of water pressing down on you doesn't care how tough you think you are. I'd been at this for 15 years and still felt that weight. One slip, one malfunction, and the surface might as well be on Mars. I told Mickey to stay tight. Just another day at the office. Nash let out a dry laugh. He said his daughter thought he worked in a regular building with coffee machines. Isabella teased that he could have that if he wanted, that he could get paid half as much to stay topside. But then Victoria's voice cut in from the surface vessel, snapping us all back to the job. She reminded us we were now at 2,800 feet, and that we had a tight 48-hour window to complete repairs. The longer the pipeline stayed down, the more money they were losing. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to say what I really thought about her timeline. Corporate people always imagined this kind of work was plug and play, like we were just going to slap duct tape on a high-pressure oil line. I gave her the company line, we'd work as fast as safety allowed. She fired back that safety was important, but so was efficiency, and that satellite photos showed 3 major breaks. I didn't even let her finish. Repairs weren't something you guessed at from grainy images. Nash looked at me and gave a slight shake of his head. He knew the type. People who cared more about charts than the ones risking their lives. The seafloor emerged in our lights, like something from another planet. Silt and debris were everywhere, stirred up from the earthquake 2 weeks earlier. The pipeline stretched off into the abyss in both directions, a massive steel artery that usually carried thousands of barrels of oil. Now it looked like something had peeled it open. Nash muttered a quiet Jesus Christ. I'd seen quake damage before, cracked joints, metal fatigue, misaligned welds. But this wasn't that. This pipeline had been ripped apart. Jagged steel edges jutted in impossible directions, like a massive force had twisted the pipe until it tore. I asked Isabella if she was recording. She was, though her pause made it clear she was trying to find a polite way to say what we all knew. The damage was unnatural. Mickey's voice came in, tight. He asked what could tear through steel like that. Nash was already inspecting the rupture, his helmet light tracing over the sheared metal. These weren't stress fractures. This looked like something had cut straight through. The pipe's wall was thick enough to handle crushing pressure, but it looked like it had been peeled back with surgical force. I floated there, trying to explain it away. Maybe debris from the quake, a big rock, or a broken piece of drilling platform. Nash didn't buy it. Isabella said her sonar was giving off strange echoes, scattered across a wide area. Victoria buzzed in again, asking for an assessment. I looked at the damage, the ragged steel, the almost deliberate destruction, and told her we'd start cutting and installing a bypass. 2 hours for an initial assessment. She reminded us about incoming weather, urging us to finish quickly. Mickey called out again. He'd found more debris, metal fragments not part of the pipeline. I swam over. There were massive, rusted steel chunks partially buried in the silt. I said they were probably from old operations. But even as I spoke, I couldn't stop thinking about how clean the tears in the pipeline were. What could do that and leave steel scattered like toys? Nash's torch came to life and we began work, but I kept one eye on the dark. Isabella's sonar was still picking up strange returns, probably just debris. But 3 miles down, the dark does things to your mind. Mickey's breathing was still a little fast, but steadying as we settled into our routine. Repairs started, progressing, but then Mickey's torch flickered out. He said something had moved past the debris field. A shadow. I swept my light across the area, but there was nothing. I told him to focus, that the mind plays tricks. But Nash chimed in, saying he'd felt like he was being watched too. That stopped me cold. Nash never spooked easily. If he was getting that itch, I was going to take it seriously. Isabella laughed nervously, trying to shake off the tension. But I noticed she drifted closer to Mickey. Victoria's voice broke through again, sharp. Weather was worsening. We needed to speed things up. I reported the first rupture sealed and said we were starting on the second. But we didn't have time. Victoria said we had 90 minutes tops. Nash swam ahead to the second break and stopped. This rupture was worse. The pipe looked like it had been twisted into a pretzel. The ground was torn up. I joined him and saw long gouges in the seafloor, fresh, clean and sharp, each one as wide as my arm. It looked like something had clawed its way through. Mickey started to panic. He couldn't stop looking behind him. Isabella tried calming him, packing the gear slowly, but her voice betrayed her nerves. I returned to Nash and asked what could have made those marks. He suggested debris again, but even he didn't believe it. Debris doesn't move in straight lines. Victoria ordered us to surface immediately. I told Mickey to go up first. He protested, but I told him he'd done enough. Isabella prepped his ascent gear. That's when her light hit something. She gasped, and I swam to her. 50 feet from the pipeline lay a field of scattered diving equipment, helmets, tanks, parts of suits. The metal was slightly corroded, but not old. Maybe 6 months at most. Nash arrived beside me. The gear was military grade. I picked up a helmet and read the serial number. Isabella began checking it. Meanwhile, Mickey's voice came in, high, tight. He said we had to go. I agreed, though I didn't say it out loud. Everything was wrong down here, Isabella confirmed. The helmet belonged to a team listed as Delta 7, sent here 6 months ago. But the company database claimed no teams had been deployed to this site in over a year. The silence that followed was thick. We were surrounded by gear from a crew that shouldn't exist. Nash whispered that it was impossible, but no one argued. Then Victoria's voice returned, but this time she sounded different, tense, even afraid. She said their instruments were picking up unusual readings and ordered us to surface immediately. I looked at my team, Nash, Isabella, Mickey. What had started as routine was now something else entirely. We were no longer just engineers on a repair job. We were the second team to stumble across something the ocean didn't want found. We were surrounded by evidence that something had been moving around down here recently. Something powerful enough to tear apart steel pipelines and leave claw marks in the seafloor. I said the words without thinking, telling them to pack it. Up we were going home. Nash floated over the scattered diving gear, his helmet light catching serial numbers etched into corroded metal. Turning a damaged air tank in his hands, he said this stuff wasn't old, maybe 6 months, tops. Isabella was already pulling up databases on her waterproof tablet, fingers dancing across the screen. She asked for the serial numbers. I watched as Mickey drifted closer to the group, his breathing still way too fast, the sound echoing through the coms. He kept glancing behind him like he expected something to emerge from the dark at any moment. Nash called out the numbers. Delta 77, Alpha 926. Silence hung as Isabella searched. Mickey's helmet light jittered across the seafloor in frantic arcs. Then she said it. That's impossible. When Nash asked what she meant, she said the equipment was registered to a repair team called Delta 7, issued 6 months ago. But there was no record of any Delta 7 in the company database. According to everything she could access, no teams had been sent to this location in over a year. Nash stopped handling the gear. He told her to run it again. She had, 3 times. The serials were real, the gear was real, but there was no mission logged, no paper trail. Either the database was wrong, or someone sent a team here and deliberately erased all evidence of it. Then Mickey's voice came through, tight and panicked. Something had just moved past the work area, something big. I spun in the direction he pointed, but my lights hit only silt and shadows. Isabella's sonar was steady and clear. Nothing on the screen, but Mickey insisted it swam against the current. Nash was still holding the tank, now rotating it slowly. He pointed out bite marks on the metal, deep gouges that looked too deliberate. They resembled teeth the size of railroad spikes. That's when Victoria's voice broke in again, demanding a status update. Weather was deteriorating fast. I looked around at the gear, the claw marks, the pipeline damage. Everything in me said we needed to surface now, but we still had one more break to fix. I gave Nash 10 minutes to seal it. Mickey protested, clearly scared out of his mind. 10 minutes, I repeated. Nash headed to the 3rd rupture, torch lighting as he moved. Isabella began collecting the equipment, documenting it with photos. I stayed near Mickey, trying to keep him calm, placing myself between him and the black void. I asked him what he saw. He said it was like a shadow, but wrong. Too smooth, too big, moving with intelligence. Bigger than our dive bell. Nash's voice came through, saying the weld was looking good. Then his torch went out. The sudden absence of light where Nash had just been hit like a punch to the chest. I called his name, no reply. Again, I called. Then Mickey screamed. Something had Nash's air hose. It was pulling him. I turned, saw Nash for just a second, arms outstretched, mouth open behind his visor. Then he was gone, yanked backwards into the black, faster than anything that size should move. Isabella's voice cracked as she activated her emergency beacon. She had his signal, bearing 270, moving fast. We all watched as the dot on her screen shot away and then stopped. Gone. His signal was gone. Victoria's voice screamed through. The comes. Nash's vitals had flatlined. I ordered radio silence. Mickey was hyperventilating. I told him to slow his breathing before he passed out. He begged to surface. Isabella, calm and focused despite the chaos, was packing equipment. She showed me her sonar, large contacts circling us just beyond the lights. I asked how many. At least 3, she said. Maybe more. They were maintaining distance, but they were coordinated. I looked up toward the surface, knowing our ascent path would take us right through whatever was out there. Could we avoid them? Isabella shook her head. They were surrounding us. Mickey whispered, "They're hunting us." And I believed him. Their movements were calculated, intelligent. Nash hadn't stood a chance. I gave the order we were leaving now, but Isabella's sonar showed one of them following. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. It was pacing us, matching our speed, staying just out of sight. 1,500 feet to go. Isabella called out our depth, trying to sound steady. The diving bell should be visible soon, but Mickey was panicking, burning through air fast. I tried to calm him, count between breaths. He couldn't. He said it was still down there. Isabella checked his air levels. He was burning oxygen at triple rate. He wouldn't make it to the bell. I told her to share her air. She was already on it, pulling the emergency hose. The procedure should have been easy, but Mickey's hands were shaking. She told him to hold still. Then the creature hit. It came from below, a blur. One moment Mickey was beside Isabella, connecting the hose. The next, something massive had wrapped around his leg. He screamed, the sound sharp and raw. I saw him vanish downward, helmet light spiraling, pulled into the abyss. Isabella dove after him, knife drawn. I followed, descending fast. Our lights found him 20 feet below, struggling. Something enormous had him, covered in slick, armored skin, limbs thick and coiled like cables. Isabella slashed at it, but Mickey's suit was collapsing under the pressure. I yelled to cut the leg seal, to free him, but his light flickered and died. His pressure readings flatlined. The creature let go. Mickey's body floated downward, limp. Isabella stared after him, frozen, then turned and began the ascent. We reached the bell 20 minutes later. Relief turned to dread. The support cable was severed cleanly. I stated the obvious, not believing it. Isabella radioed the surface. Victoria's voice was laced with real fear. Their sonar had lost. All trace of the platform, it had vanished. 1 minute it was there, the next, nothing. Isabella checked our systems. 12 hours of air if we rationed. I asked about rescue. Victoria said they were sending a submersible, 6 hours minimum. Isabella pulled out her tablet. She told me she'd been recording everything, not just for documentation. She had suspected something, had been collecting files, reports of missing teams, anomalies, lies. 3 other teams had vanished here over 2 years, all officially blamed on equipment failures. Delta 7, Alpha 3, Bravo 9, all buried by corporate silence. She uploaded everything to a secure backup server. 6 hours later, lights cut through the water. The rescue sub arrived. We docked, transferred pressure, prepared to board. Before leaving, I looked one last time out the port. That's when I saw it, the creature. It hovered in the distance, a massive silhouette at the edge of the light. Muscular, covered in glistening scales. Its eyes locked onto us, intelligent, predatory. It watched, then turned and vanished into the black. Isabella completed her upload. It was done, everything recorded, stored away. As we sealed the airlock and began our final ascent, none of us looked back. I couldn't stop thinking about those eyes, intelligent, unblinking, and far too calculating for a creature that size. It hadn't attacked the rescue sub, it had just watched, like it was observing, learning, planning. Whatever lived in the deep around that pipeline was smart. Smart enough to know that killing everyone would attract attention. Let a few people live, leave just enough ambiguity, and no one would believe them. But Isabella's footage would change. That, or at least it would have, if it hadn't conveniently gone corrupted during the emergency upload. The real question was whether anyone would listen in time, before the company sent another crew down to die in the dark. The sub's lights disappeared behind us as we rose through the black, silent water, leaving that trench behind. But I knew, deep down, it wasn't the end. That creature wasn't finished, and the oil company had invested too much to abandon the pipeline now. They'd send more people, and the thing that killed Nash and Mickey would be waiting. 2 days later, I sat in Meridian Oil's Houston headquarters, staring blankly at the condensation dripping from my coffee cup, watching it spread across a spotless glass conference table. I had been in a steel coffin a mile beneath the ocean's surface, witnessing something massive and alien decide whether we lived or died. Now, I was listening to Victoria, clean and composed in her corporate perfection, explain how it was all in my head: nitrogen, narcosis, psychological stress, hallucinations caused by trauma and equipment failure. She clicked calmly through a presentation of charts and diagrams, while 3 silent executives sat like mannequins, taking notes but never speaking. Isabella was beside me, tense, her silence louder than anything Victoria was saying. I told her we'd seen the creature. She didn't even blink. It was debris, she said. Shadows. Our minds trying to create order in chaos. When I pressed about Nash and Mickey, she gave a rehearsed response. Their bodies hadn't been recovered, but decompression at that depth was instant and final. Their families had already been compensated. Isabella snapped. She accused Victoria of contacting the families before we'd even hit the surface. Victoria didn't deny it. She just smiled and recited policy. They had already buried them under paperwork. When we demanded to see the helmet footage, Victoria claimed it had been corrupted during upload. Salt water and electronics don't mix, she reminded us. Convenient, Isabella muttered. But they had our reports. Documented gear malfunctions, structural failures, case closed. One of the silent men slid folders across the table's settlement agreements. Generous compensation for trauma, wages lost, psychological care. All we had to do was sign. I opened mine. The number inside was staggering, more than I'd earn in 3 years of dives. All I had to do was agree that Nash and Mickey died from an industrial accident. Isabella didn't even touch hers. She asked about the other teams. The gear we found Delta 7 clearly wasn't from our mission. Victoria hesitated. Half a second, but I saw it. She admitted there had been other incidents. Deep sea work is dangerous, she said. Accidents happen. But how many? That was proprietary. Isabella kept pushing. How many had died down there? Victoria just smiled again, cool and It was tragic, yes, but they were assembling a new team. Better suits, military-grade equipment, divers with combat experience. They were sending another team. Of course they were. Too much money was at stake. The pipeline had to be repaired. Environmental consequences, economic fallout, all excuses. I asked about the new gear. Victoria showed us upgraded suits, reinforced with advanced pressure resistance, sonar systems, emergency ascent options, even weapon systems. Divers were expertary, former Navy SEALs, trained for stress and higher risk operations. Isabella stood up, furious. They knew. They had known something was down there when they sent us. Victoria gave her a measured look and dismissed it as grief and conspiracy thinking. But when she turned to me and offered me the leadership of the next mission, I froze. My experience made me uniquely qualified, she said. The money would be triple my rate. Bonus included, I thought. About Mickey, about Nash's torch vanishing into darkness, about those eyes just watching us rise. I said I needed to know what really killed them. Victoria smiled. Equipment failure, she insisted. But if I needed closure, leading the mission might help. Isabella begged me not to do it, said I was being used as bait. Victoria reassured us this. Time there would be backup, weapons, sonar, a submarine watching from above. Defensive measures, she called them, against large marine life, sharks. Isabella laughed bitterly. Sure, sharks. I closed the folder. I said I'd meet the new team first. Victoria agreed. I wanted disclosure about past incidents too. Her pause was longer this time, but she nodded. Isabella stared at me, disappointed. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was crazy. But I couldn't let Nash and Mickey's deaths be signed away on some corporate ledger. If something really was living down there, someone had to face it. I told them I had one condition: Isabella had to come too. Victoria said she had already declined. Then I declined too. Victoria glanced at her silent suits, and something unspoken passed between them. We'll discuss it, she finally said. Isabella and I left without signing anything. In the elevator, she grabbed my shoulder. They've known for a long time, she said. This isn't about the pipeline. They're studying what's down there. She told me we should take the money and vanish. But I couldn't. I saw my reflection in the elevator floor. Someone who'd already made his choice. I knew I had to go back. I needed to see it again, even if it killed me. The new dive suit was like armor, thick plating, integrated sonar. A hum from the jammers pulsed at my chest. They were designed for survival, but I knew they weren't perfect. Barbara's voice came through, monitoring from above. We were descending fast. Leon took point, his harpoon gun ready XL. No hesitation. He'd heard about the creature and didn't even blink. We reached visual on the pipeline. It looked worse than before. Fresh damage, long clean tears in the metal. Deliberate. Something had tested the structure. Isabella said the damage was spreading. Leon moved into defensive position. Whatever did this hadn't stopped. Barbara reported multiple contacts at the edge of sonar range. At least 6. Moving in formation, not random. Gordon adjusted his sonic deterrence. I told him to wait. Then Victoria's voice came through. No more calm, corporate tone. She sounded afraid. Seismic activity directly beneath us. Patterns irregular. Isabella filmed the deeper bite marks. Something was getting bolder. Leon tracked movement at bearing 270. Something massive. My welding gear kept failing. Power fluctuations. Interference like a heartbeat. Barbara confirmed sonar jamming. Gordon said it wasn't natural. Nothing about this was what I asked Leon. For visuals, nothing. But he felt them. Pack behavior. Coordinated. Victoria's voice returned. More seismic movement. Something large coming from the trench. Isabella floated beside a portion of pipeline covered in varied bite marks. Different sizes. Deliberate. Measured. She looked at me and whispered the only thing that made sense. They're studying us. Look at these marks. They're not random. Isabella's voice cut through the cums as she pointed at the deep gouges in the damaged pipeline. Something's been testing our equipment, like it's experimenting. Before anyone could respond, Gordon's sonic deterrent system activated on its own. Low-frequency pulses throbbed through the water. Instead of pushing anything away, the vibrations seemed to provoke whatever was lurking in the dark. I shouted for Gordon to shut it down, but he was already trying, panicked, reporting that the system had powered up by itself. Barbara's sonar lit up with a flood of red indicators, dozens of contacts moving in fast. The creatures weren't retreating, they were closing in. Leon aimed his harpoon gun at the largest approaching blip. His calm military demeanor slipped just slightly as he muttered, "Whatever's coming isn't scared." Our welding gear died immediately as electromagnetic interference surged. Helmet lights flickered. Beyond the flickering beams, I saw them, huge shapes gliding silently, purposefully. I called up to the surface. We needed extraction immediately. Victoria's voice, barely decipherable through layers of static, confirmed our worst fears. Something enormous was rising from the trench. Something even bigger than what we had already seen. Isabella's grip tightened on my arm as she pointed to Barbara's sonar. The contacts weren't converging on us, they were forming a perimeter around something else rising up. "They're guarding it," Isabella whispered. Leon tried to establish a defensive ring, but his harpoon looked like a toy against subway-sized shapes. Gordon's equipment was still firing off unpredictable pulses, aggravating everything around us. The interference had crippled most of our tools. I gave the order to initiate emergency ascent, but then Barbara's sonar caught a deeper contact, massive, rising directly toward us. The first hit came like a battering ram from below. Leon's harpoon fired reflexively as a shadow the size of a bus collided with our gear platform. The harpoon bounced off armor-thick scales. He was already reloading, but the look in his eyes said it all. We weren't going to win this fight. Barbara called out that we were surrounded on all sides. Her sonar was blipping like a fireworks finale. Gordon's deterrent was now emitting high-frequency screeches that made my skull vibrate. Instead of scaring them off, the signal seemed to direct them strategically. They coordinated, struck from 3 angles at once. The deterrents are drawing them in, Isabella shouted. Gordon tried desperately to shut the system down, but it was too late. Something massive moved past our light perimeter. I fired a flare. The red burst lit up a monster. Its body stretched beyond what the flare could show, armored in mathematically arranged scales. Its eyes weren't animal eyes. They were intelligent, watching, calculating. Leon placed himself between us and the largest contact, trying to shield us, but it was like watching a soldier protect a bunker with a slingshot. "They're executing a plan," he said. "Not hunting." Then Barbara's sonar station exploded in a mess of sparks and mangled metal. She swam toward us with her backup tablet. Her face was all business, even as chaos closed in. "Primary sensors are gone," she reported. "But I got readings first. At least a dozen of them, probably more." Before we could process that, one of the creatures made its move. It came in fast, jaws wide, a prehistoric nightmare with teeth shaped like blades. Gordon didn't have time to run. The thing bit him clean in half. His scream died with the signal. Isabella didn't hesitate. She yanked explosive charges from her gear, ordered Leon to cover her, and launched 2 into the water where Gordon had vanished. The explosions lit up the trench like lightning, revealing even more shapes, impossibly fast, moving through the shockwaves like they weren't even there. Leon reloaded, but didn't fire. "They're too fast," he said, for the first time sounding shaken. "Military training doesn't cover this." They weren't attacking at random. Everything we brought was being picked off methodically. Our welding gear was shattered. The emergency ascent platform had been surgically dismantled. Even our backup communications array had vanished, pulled away by something we didn't even see. Barbara was still trying to document. Her scientist brain locked into the patterns of the attack. "They're taking out our escape routes first," she said. "Then our defenses." Leon didn't last long. He was forming a perimeter around Isabella and me when something grabbed him from the shadows. His knife flashed once in the helmet light. Then he was gone. His scream cut out mid-sentence. I didn't even see what took him. Isabella and I backed toward the remains of the platform. The ascent cables were cut. We were stuck, 1,500 feet underwater with creatures that had outthought and outfought everything we had. She turned to me, quiet and calm. "I need to tell you something." Her camera was still rolling, still collecting data. "I've been documenting more than this mission," she said. "The company knew about the creatures, about the past. Teams, they've been covering it up." I tried to argue, but she showed me the tablet reports, sonar data, files going back months. "They're not just protecting their territory," she said. "They're guarding something deeper than we saw it." The largest creature surfaced. I got a full view of its head, huge, scarred, purposeful. The eyes locked on us with recognition. It had fought before. It had survived. And it knew why we were here. "Something else has been trying to reach whatever's down there," Isabella said, voice barely a whisper. Victoria's voice crackled through again. "Dozens of contacts rising toward your position." I met Isabella's eyes. The creature just watched, judging, deciding if we were worth killing. "They're protecting their breeding grounds," Isabella said. "The pipeline runs through it. They're trying to destroy it to keep us away. The company wants what's down there, something worth billions." The creature tilted its head like it understood every word. Then it opened its mouth and let out a sound so loud it killed every system we had left. Everything went dark. No lights, no power, just the hum of something ancient rising. Then the emergency ascent kicked in, violent, brutal. Isabella and I shot upward, suits adjusting as we soared. "We're ascending too fast," she warned. But the alternative was death. I looked down and immediately regretted it. The largest creature was following, not struggling, just pacing us, like a predator giving its prey a head start. "It's not even trying," I said. "It could have caught us already." Isabella stared at her tablet, the data still screaming. "Cassidy," she said, "look at this." The water around us churned in ways that defied logic. Isabella stared at her sonar in disbelief as the entire water column began to shift. Her screen pulsed with movement, dozens of massive contacts rising in synchronized motion from impossible depths, creatures emerging from trenches that should have been lifeless. They weren't just reacting, they were mobilizing. Every signature on her scanner moved with coordinated precision. Isabella's voice tightened with dread as she whispered the truth. We were only beginning to understand. This wasn't a random encounter anymore. This was a full-scale tactical response. As we passed 300 feet, the surface vessel came into view through the haze of the upper water. Relief turned to confusion. The ship was listing hard, tilted awkwardly like it had been struck. Debris floated in the current. Then Victoria's voice shattered the comms, panicked and sharp. She was shouting over sirens, calling Mayday. Something was attacking the hull, slamming into it from below. I pushed my suit harder, ignoring the pressure warnings screaming across my display. The surface swirled above us. but between us and safety moved massive shape screeches, tearing at the vessel with surgical precision. Their coordinating surface and underwater attacks. Isabella muttered, her eyes still locked on her. Recording gear. They're using strategy. This is military precision. Victoria's transmission became frantic engine room breach, order to abandon ship. Isabella began uploading everything, determined to get her footage out before we lost all systems. The world needs to see this. If we don't make it, they have to know. I asked if she could break through the interference. Maybe, if I timed the burst perfectly. The signal's being jammed, but I think I've got a narrow window. At 200 feet, the surface was clearer, and so was the disaster. The ship was sinking. Lifeboats floated nearby, surrounded by predators. The creatures weren't just attacking the ship, they were waiting for the survivors. Then Isabella screamed in triumph. The upload completed. All data had been sent to secure servers. The truth was out now. Right at that moment, our final communication system shorted out, fried by another pulse from below. We were completely cut off, heading straight into chaos with no lifeline. At 100 feet, a rescue sub appeared, bright lights, a final hope. But it barely got close before 3 creatures surrounded it, slamming it from all sides. Over emergency frequencies, the pilot's voice crackled through. He was aborting. Too many targets. The sub backed away, leaving us to break the surface. Alone. We breached hard, our flotation systems kicking in, tossing us into waves filled with shattered equipment and floating wreckage. The support vessel was almost gone. Lifeboats flipped in the distance. Among the chaos, I spotted Victoria clinging to a panel of broken decking, bruised and soaked, her usual composure completely gone. Isabella and I fought the waves to reach her. She looked up at us with hollow eyes. "They're everywhere," she said. They tore through the ship like they knew where every weak point was. I confronted her then, demanded the truth. She glanced at Isabella's still recording camera and finally cracked. The pipeline was never the real mission, she admitted. We found a massive cavern system beneath it, ancient, untouched, filled with mineral wealth beyond anything. On Earth, the company couldn't ignore it. She explained that every maintenance mission had been a cover for deeper exploration. We've been trying to breach their breeding grounds for 2 years. Every team that vanished, every accident ... was a battle we lost. I looked at her in horror. You knew what killed Nash. You sent us anyway. She didn't deny it. The board knew. They thought we could outgun them. Then the ocean erupted. 30 feet away, a creature breached, water cascading off scales as big as plates. It hung in the air for a terrifying second, eyes scanning us, then crashed back down with a shockwave that nearly swamped us. "They're trying to drive us away," Victoria said, barely able to keep her voice steady. "Every attack, every sabotage, this is them defending their home." Helicopter blades whirred in the distance, rescue finally approaching. But as they neared, Isabella kept filming. "How many teams?" she asked. Victoria whispered, 12, all dead. We told the families it was equipment failure. Another creature surfaced, even larger than the last. It stared down at us, mouth slightly open, rows of blade-like teeth visible. Then it let out a sound like nothing I'd ever heard, deep, resonant, and full of intention. It traveled through the water, through our bodies, and was answered by dozens more from the depths. I realized then they were coordinating again. This was not over. Victoria was weeping now. "The board will never stop," she said. "They'll keep sending people until they break through." One last shape moved beneath her. She barely had time to look before it struck, dragging her into the water in an instant. No scream, just bubbles and silence. Isabella and I floated in the wreckage alone, rescue still minutes away. Below us stretched 3 miles of blackness, full of intelligence and fury. They'd won their first battle, and I knew this war was just beginning. Months later, I sat in my office in San Diego, staring at incident reports that read like bedtime stories compared to what I'd lived. I was a consultant, now deepwater risk assessment. Surviving made me valuable. My phone buzzed again, Isabella. Seismic activity up 300% near the trench. They're moving, the message read. I deleted it, just like the last dozen. Isabella had dedicated herself to tracking them, publishing warnings. No one believed her. Meridian Oil had buried it all. Our mission never officially happened. The footage, dismissed as CGI. Sarah walked in, smiling, handing me coffee. We'd married recently. She never asked for details anymore. The nightmares were bad enough. Sometimes I woke up gasping, hearing sonar pings in my dreams. The therapist said trauma fades with time, but the therapist never saw those eyes in the dark. That night, while settling in with dinner, breaking news interrupted the quiet. Meridian's Gulf pipeline had been destroyed, completely dismantled. Over 50 miles. On screen appeared Isabella, thinner, intense. This wasn't a failure, she said. This was planned. These creatures are defending their territory. The reporter asked if she meant sabotage. Isabella didn't blink. The ocean is fighting back. Sarah turned to me, concerned. You know her, don't you? I couldn't deny it. Footage rolled sonar, seismic data identical to what we saw before our team was torn apart. Except now, it spanned hundreds of miles. My phone buzzed one last time. Isabella, again. Emergency override. They've spread. Florida, California. It's not just the Gulf anymore. I turned off the phone and held Sarah closer, but I couldn't stop thinking about those eyes watching, waiting. They weren't just defending anymore. They were evolving, and they were coming.